Hi, ML.
So that's Taylor. She's the new owner of Campo Divino.
Okay.
So
Cool. Is it still down by the senior center?
yeah,
Yeah.
Definitely have to get used to you and glasses. I don't know.
Usually you can't see my glasses, that's the reason why. I opted for fabulous glasses. I know I'm fabulous. I can admit it.
There's so much nicer than the one at my house. Might be because the dog's
Might be a reason why.
Sam, I need you to sign the warning for town meeting because you voted on it, right?
Yes,
Okay, I wasn't sure whether
I believe so.
You did.
I did.
You were still here.
those that were online, it was a little hard to see who was.
Yeah, Mel, I think Mel had
I
to
think
drop
Mel's
off.
the only one who wasn't.
Correct, she
Yeah.
lost service.
Yeah. Thank you.
Two minutes. And we're all here.
It is watching, it's like watching paint dry. These last 5 minutes before.
Usually you all roll in.
I know, I
The
left my
last-
house at 5:50, and then I was here at 5:54. And I was like, well, I've stayed in my jammies.
You could have come in your jammies.
But you're gonna be getting from the door to behind. Other than that, flawless
Did you
plan.
dig sideways? Like, remember the Simpsons where the Simpsons dug sideways underneath the school and then it collapsed?
Yeah, I remember that.
You could do that. Yeah.
Planning the demise of the
But then who
school.
would own it?
No.
Jeez.
Talking,
What a horrible conversation to walk into.
no, we were talking about oil, and he mentioned, what if it's under Hope? And I was like, well, we could dig sideways. Like the Simpsons did.
That's, yeah,
Black-
revenue raiser.
I was gonna say,
Gold,
terrible
Texas
for the
tea.
planet,
Yeah.
good for the budget, right? That's true.
I'd vote to dig.
We know,
In a
Michael, we
heartbeat.
know.
In a heartbeat.
Oh, Michael.
Kidding me?
I have
You
family.
wouldn't?
I have
Are you
family in
saying you
Alaska,
wouldn't?
so I can't say otherwise. They get a stipend from the
If-
government
Yeah, if
because
we
of
got-
oil.
You cannot tell me, if we found out we had oil on a property that we had, you wouldn't dig?
Well, of course we would.
Of course we would.
I mean, we're in a huge hole.
Seminary Street parking lot.
We're digging. We're moving.
Trade it out. Here's your pile, your
That would be like
bags of
super
cash,
beneficial to
Teddy.
us. Listen,
Yeah, right.
I'm not opposed to
Barry
having
found the bags of
singles
cash in the
and
form of
Barrys.
oil. It's like the Jeffersons.
All right, everybody, it is 6 o'clock, so I will call this Barre City Council meeting to order. It's a regular meeting on Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024. It is 6 PM. We have all city councilors present tonight, including Councilor Deering, Councilor Booton, Councilor Wozniak, Councilor Stockwell, and Councilor Lozon, and joining us online, Councilor Chambel. Hope you feel better soon, Mel. Tonight's agenda is available online and in the back of the room. The meeting has been publicly posted, is being recorded, and subject to Vermont's open meeting law and the council's rules of procedure, both of which are available online. Welcome to everybody joining us here in the room and in the Zoom room online. If you're joining us online, please keep in mind that the chat function should only be used for technical issues or difficulties, not discussion. We offer online access as a convenience, and we will continue the meeting if any technical difficulties occur. Please stay muted if you're not speaking, and raise your hand or signal if you'd like to be recognized. Speak into the microphone and introduce yourself. And that's, if you're here in the room, I'll ask that you come forward to the front microphone so everybody can hear you. I'll call on speakers in order, allowing those who haven't spoken yet to speak first, and limiting time if necessary to get through our business tonight. If you have any questions about process or procedure, please ask and we will get it sorted. And thanks in advance to everyone for participating in a civil way. With that, that takes us to our second item on the agenda, adjustments to the agenda. Manager Strelick-Castro.
Thanks, Mayor. Just one adjustment is to request an executive session for real estate as part of item 11 on the agenda.
A real estate item. That's good. All right. Any other adjustments to the agenda? Councilor Lozon.
Thank you. If there's no objection from the council, I'd like to move item 8C to the consent agenda. The manager provided us with a thorough brief. When the time comes, I do have one simple question.
So to stagger committee terms, is there any objection to that?
No, seems fine.
Hearing and seeing none. That takes us up to visitors and communication. This is an opportunity for anyone to speak to an item that is not on the agenda. If you have an item, if you would like to speak to an item that is on the agenda, just raise your hand when we take up that item of business. Ellen Kay. Good evening.
Hello, Ellen Kay, East Street, Barre City. I just wanted to let everybody know and congratulate the staff at Central Vermont Medical Center, the nurses, nurses and techs, for finally, after a long struggle, coming to a tentative agreement on a contract for their new union. Many of those people live here in Barre City, so I just wanted everybody to know about that, and all of the people who have supported them and helped to put pressure so that they got a good contract and can afford to live where they work.
That's great news. Thank you. Yay.
Thanks, Ellen. Are there other items for visitors and communications? All right. Hearing and seeing none, that takes us to our consent agenda. We have approval of the minutes of the regular city council meeting of Tuesday, April 11th, 2024. We have ratification of the city warrants from the week of April 17th, 2024, and the approval of the city warrants from the week of April 24th, 2024. We do have, or do we have any licenses or permits? None. Okay. But we do have ratification of the council's 4/11/24 approval of a lease finance agreement. We have acceptance of a warranty deed from Maryland Ford for the purchase of Duffy Avenue lots. We have authorization to the manager to execute an LOI with DEW to develop the Seminary Street and Campbell Place parking lots. And we have the item 8C that was moved up to stagger committee terms to provide appointment balance. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
moved.
Second.
Councilor Stockwell, second by Councilor Lozon. Any further discussion on that?
Yeah, I just had one quick question. How are you going to choose whose seats get extended? We gonna flip coins?
Yeah,
Draw straws?
I think it'll have to be, there's some vacancies on some of those committees. So for example, cemeteries has some vacancies that could end up being the terms that only go 2 years, for example, and the people, if there's people here the council wishes to have for 3 years, then those could go to the candidates. The plan is to make that clear once the candidates come in, how many seats are for number of terms, and perhaps even the candidates themselves would self-select for 2 or 3 year terms.
Yep, perfect.
But the preference will be where we can to use the vacancies for the shorter terms if possible.
Gotcha. And thank you for the thorough briefing.
Sure.
And so the advertised terms are not gonna know how long the seat term is?
They don't right now. And actually, this was something that was brought up to me by two members of committees who serve now, and I informed them that these are the terms we've had. I agreed with them that it makes sense for there to be some balance so that there's continuity of membership, and so that even from the council's perspective, you have many more vacancies to consider this year than you did last year because of the imbalance. So I agreed with them that it made sense. And it only came to me after the advertisement had gone out.
And what page is that on the public packet? Because I went through the link online to prepare for the meeting and I didn't see that.
Probably right before it's page 60, it says. So it should be on there.
I must have it may have been an oversight on my part. But if it's not here, it might be, there's the charter on page.
So it's right there.
There it is, okay.
Yeah. And it only impacts a
Sorry,
handful of committees.
Okay, and it's just the ones that have too much of a cluster.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so that's the consent agenda. We have a motion and a second. Councilor Deering?
So I just had a question regarding the sewer capacity for the LOI that we're going forward with. There was some concern within the community from some members that there wasn't enough sewer capacity for that. I thought that we had discussed that previously and that there was plenty of sewer capacity to add to that.
We have plenty of capacity at the wastewater treatment facility. Yeah. Yep.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it, the motion carries. That takes us to the city clerk and treasurer report.
Just a few things. The ballots arrived today, and the first 500 of them went out in the mail today. We've got another 35 that'll go in the mail tomorrow. And so we're accepting, obviously, requests for ballots. We actually had some people walk into the office and vote early in the office today, so that's also an option. People can stop by the office. So it's nice to have that ball rolling. Let's see, other things, Green Up bags arrived today. We've been getting lots of phone calls and people stopping by looking for those. They finally arrived, and they'll be gone before Green Up Day. They tend to go quick. We've got about 250, so we invite people to stop by and pick up Green Up bags. We submitted the application yesterday to the state for reimbursement of the education portion of abatements that we have held over the past spring. It's about 44,400 that qualifies under the criteria as was laid out in the statute. That's not everything, that's not all the ed funds that we abated, but it's everything that falls into the categories. There is, I know the legislature is looking at the potential of extending the current law stopped on April 15th, but there is some consideration of extending it. We do have 6 more abatement requests that have come in the last week. And I'm fully expecting there to be more. So if we had additional opportunities for ed tax reimbursement, that would be great, but we'll be pleased if we get that 44,000. It won't come as a check to us. What happens at the end of the year is we get a true up from the state, from the Agency of Education, as far as what the last payment we have to make to the schools is. And it will be incorporated into that. So we would pay them less by whatever they approve for us. So that's how it will be accounted for. And then lastly, just a reminder that the annual meeting elections are on Tuesday, May 14th. Polls will be open at the auditorium from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then fourth quarter property taxes are due the next day, May 15th. So You can pay. I actually listened to, I've got 3 different May songs. I'm trying to pick out which one I want as my sort of final going away song. So I think I know which one I want to run on the ad, on the
Do a
radios.
remix.
Huh?
Do a remix. Do all three.
Yeah,
That would be.
That would be really amazing.
maybe not.
Challenge accepted.
You could tie the song into your future TIF consultant, that you have to do that.
I could do different things.
Are those files on computer?
On my personal computer, yes.
You say royalty, Councilor Buden?
Yeah, well, I was kind of hoping that it was on.
No, they're on the server.
So I can't
He
FOIA
might
it?
FOIA you, I don't know.
No FOIA?
They're on the server.
Oh, they are on the
Of course
server.
they are.
Councilor Wazazak.
Actual question, can you just review for those listening the general rule of thumb and recommendations for ordering the ballots? Like,
Yep.
when is it too late to
Yep.
order your ballot?
Yep.
How you drop it in the mailbox before the election?
Right. So there's a couple different ways, a few different ways you can order ballots. You can call the office and make a request. You can make a request on behalf of yourself or anybody else. We will take your name, address, and phone number if you're making a request on behalf of another person, because we do have to track who the requester is, not just who the voter is. So you can do it by phone. You can send me an email. You can go online to my voter page, which is mvp.vermont spelled out .gov, and that link is on the city website under our election page. And you can make the request through that. If you go through my voter page, not only can you make the request, but then you can track your ballot. You can see when it got mailed out, when it was returned back. If there were any problems with it, if it had a defect that needed to be corrected, you can do that. You can make requests for ballots up to the day before. Where it gets challenging is if you want it mailed to you, you have to allow enough time for it to get to you in the mail and returned in the mail, or you can bring it back in person. You can bring it back to the office until 4 o'clock the day before, or you can bring it back to the polls anytime on May 14th, anytime from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. As long as we've received it by 7 p.m., it counts. So.
Okay, and then Councilor Lozon. And if you could come to the microphone. Yeah, sorry about that.
If you received a ballot the last election, do you assume that you'll get one this, or do you have to make a new request?
You have to request it every time. So you have to request for the whole year, and most of the people who requested back in January and February requested for the whole year. So they don't have to call
Okay.
in and make another request. If you only requested for that one election, then you have to make the request.
No memory of that, so I guess I should use the My
So-
Voter page.
So you
huh?
can go to my voter page and see whether you've got a request there. I'm trying to remember. I was stuffing 500 envelopes today, and I can't remember whether I saw your name or not, Ellen. Yeah.
Councilor Lozon.
Thanks, Mary. Carol, you mentioned that we had submitted 44,000
Yep.
in requests. Do you know what the total amount abated was?
119 was the total abatements that we have granted so far this year. That includes some properties that weren't flood related.
Right.
So it's 119,000. Of that, about 50, a little over 50 is education. And the balance, 69, is municipal.
Yeah.
So of course, the municipal is on our dime anyway.
So that will directly impact
Yep.
the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024.
Correct.
Okay. And that's around, is it fair math to just take the 119 less the 44 equals 75? That's the impact?
No,
Is it
because
not?
the 44 is the amount of education abatement that qualified. The actual amount of education abatement was a little over 50.
Right.
So there was another 6,000 or so of education abatement that didn't qualify.
So that will directly impact
Yeah, so that will also
Right,
be
that was the number
included.
I'm kind of trying to
Yeah.
drill down to, so it's roughly, Nicholas probably already knows this number, but well, and I don't mean to laugh, it's a $75,000 hit
Yeah,
to
approximately.
to our budget.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that 7,000 of education tax that doesn't qualify for reimbursement, we have to pay that to the school whether
Right.
we collect it or not. So, that's definitely out of pocket, so.
Thank you.
Are there other questions for Carol? All right, hearing and seeing none, that takes us to our Liquor and Cannabis Control Board. So we have several applications tonight and one person here in the room.
Yeah, so I think we might want to start with Taylor, if you want to come on up. This is Taylor Bodette. She's the new owner as of the 1st of this month for Campo Divino down in the Wall Street complex. And I told her that it's our process to invite new owners, new license holders in to meet with the council. And so here she is.
And this will be for a first and second class license, right?
Yep, and this is the first time that she's getting that establishment will have a first-class license to actually be serving. And so you might want to talk a little bit about why you want to expand into that.
Sure. So I want to carry on what Bob and Michelle, the old owners, did. And they would sell wine by the bottle and everything like that. And they talked to me a little bit about wine. And I also own Taste Vermont. So it's a charcuterie and catering business. And I thought that it would be really interesting to pair some charcuterie boards with some wine flights. So I definitely want to get into doing some wine flights, maybe some wine slushies in the summer, things like that. I have availability for 23 seats in that space, and I'm also looking to potentially move to an outside area in the future for a separate license to have the wine flights and things during the summer as well. So I'm just looking to kind of expand that avenue.
Councilor Stockwell.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And it sounds wonderful, but tell me, do you have the cannoli recipe?
So actually, we're doing rotating flavors of cannoli each weekend. So Fridays and Saturdays when our shop's open, we're going to be doing a different flavor every weekend. So
Really good to know.
Taylor, you're relocating your charcuterie business there as well?
Correct.
So will they be co-located?
So they will be co-located out of the same kitchen. They will be running on separate hours as their separate entities, separate businesses. But yes, both of the businesses will run out of that one kitchen.
We haven't met. I think you may have spoken with my wife, Karen, when you did the charcuterie board for our family Christmas party.
Yes.
It only took them 10 minutes to.
Yeah, I know, right? It takes a
was
long time to set.
awesome.
Thank
It was
you.
awesome. Thank you. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Taylor. Council Booton.
Just letting you know, I abstain from all liquor and licenses, so it's nothing personal. I'm very
About
happy
cannoli?
to have a business.
About cannoli.
Cannoli.
Oh,
I don't think there's licenses for.
No,
cannoli.
no.
Maybe there should be. I don't know. All right. Well, Taylor Bodette, thank you.
you.
for
Thank you.
investing in dairy. Yeah.
you.
And we still have some other licenses.
So,
here on
yeah,
the
so
list, too.
this license is in conjunction with licenses for Asian Gourmet, Beverage Baron, both Champlain Farm locations up on Washington Street in South Main, Denty's Market, North End Deli Mart, and Paramount Theater. And it's, the chart was in I emailed around to you earlier today, I think. So it's a grouping of first class, second class, third class outside consumption permits, and then both tobacco and tobacco substitute applications. So your approval this evening would be for the whole shebang.
Is there a motion to approve as the group as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Council Jeremy, second by Council Lozon. Any further discussion on this? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed,
abstain.
guys have it. The motion carries. That takes us to our manager's report, item number 7 on the agenda.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple updates for the council. Buyouts, I continue to be a big work stream. So we continue to work with VEM and property owners on the Swift Current, as I mentioned to council last week. Those applications are for a sort of a faster track buyout. and they're due to VEM on April 30th. So we're working with homeowners, trying to encourage them to get those that have qualified for this program to get their applications in if they continue to be interested in buyouts. So as I mentioned, all the properties that VEM had identified as eligible for this program had also, 4 of the 5 had also happened to be on our first tier of buyouts, as well as being clusters along the river. So we've made contact with all those homeowners to encourage them again to, to get their applications into us so we can get them moving through this process a little bit quicker. As a reminder, the Berrytown Yard Waste site disposal site opened on Saturday. It will remain open on Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. The hours will be expanded if more volunteers are located or identified. So if anybody would like to volunteer, please get in touch with me, and encourage people who use the site to please check out the flyer on our website and on Facebook for details about the appropriate use of the site. They have some restrictions, and we want to make sure we're following those so that we can continue to use the site. We last week installed the new play structure at the Garfield Playground, and it was open for play on Saturday, April 20th. As you may recall, this neighborhood was without an adequate playground since September of 2022. It had to be removed for safety and insurance reasons. So very grateful for the patience of this neighborhood, and I was really happy, really nice to see the outpouring of happiness on social media as people got hold of the news that this was going on. We are at the staff level, we are participating in a department head level flood after action with, it's a guided process with VEM and Central Vermont Regional Planning. There's I think as we've learned a lot. We had a chance to apply what we learned last December. And there's a lot we did right. There's a lot we have to do better. And unfortunately, we're expecting to have to prepare for these kinds of events. So really happy with Chief Cushman and Deputy Chief Aldsworth for putting this together, and all our department heads will be able to learn so that we can be better next time. And then very, very excited about this, that the police department has finally rolled out body worn cameras. And so these are now active and in use by all officers. The chief has been a huge advocate for this, been very supportive of it, and just really credit to the department as a whole, but also to all the officers who've gotten trained and being part of the implementation, and who want to be, we have faced no resistance on this. I think people are, there's transparency on both sides, and our officers are just as eager for the transparency of how they relate with the public. So just really huge kudos to Chief Vale, Deputy Chief Eastman, and all the officers who've done a great job making this happen. I think we're one of the last departments of our size in the state and to do this. So it's long overdue, and very pleased that they got it over the finish line.
Great news all around. Any questions?
Just one.
What's it doing?
Did you ever follow up with see if we could have high school students volunteer at the yard waste site for volunteer hours?
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Deering. I did not. I will ask Chris about that.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Just want to try to get them the community service hours they need.
For people wondering where that site is, where is it?
Upper Holden Road.
Upper Holden Road.
Yeah.
It's at the very end of that?
No.
No.
If you go up, so up by McDonald's there, take the right onto Holden Road. It's maybe about a football field's length on the left-hand side.
Okay, thanks. All right, if there are no other questions for the manager, that takes us to our first item of new business. So we have a presentation on the VLCT, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, Welcoming and Engaging Communities cohort presentation, to be introduced by the chair of our Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging Committee, Joellen Mulvaney.
Good evening, thank you. As you know, our city has been participating in the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, Welcoming and Engaging Communities. And Councilor Deering, Councilor Stockwell, and myself have been the representatives. There are 12 other communities in the state at this point. I think this is the second round of that program. And so altogether, I think there may be something like 22, from which we actually collected a lot of data, so that could be useful to us in the future. The cohort method that they used is kind of an experimental learning kind of style. where we were to select a wicked problem that we thought our community had. And then they took us through a process of focusing and working on that particular problem. So the first thing we did was define a problem for ourselves. Then we plan a strategic approach to actions that resolve the problem. And then we figure out how best to shepherd that transformation that we're looking for. Our delegation and several others chose civil discourse as the wicked problem. But by the way, some of the terms that I'm going to use actually came out of the program itself. These were not self-designed by us. So we can explain it more fully if you wish. Anyway, when people witness or experience bullying and disrespect, they're reluctant to speak up or to participate in civil society. And if we don't hear from them, then we diminish our ability to include them in municipal decision making. So that's kind of a basic thing that we were thinking about. Agreeing to basic conditions of behavior is one requirement for civil discourse. The inability to follow those conditions and the lack of civility actually chills free speech. This actually makes civil discourse central to democracy. And democratic values seek to include all of us. After choosing the problem, then we began to plan a plan for our city. We gave you a handout, and that's the template that we're using to make this plan. This method of problem solving is useful for any and all problems. And so we passed this document on to you, so it might be helpful to the council, to the committees, and even families. You know, we're going to be strengthened by a more inclusive and welcoming community where everyone feels like they belong. And today we had a cohort meeting, and I want to read to you one of the quotes that was given to us by one of the cohort communities. This quote is from Confucius. To put the world in order, we must first put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, we must first put the family in order. To put the family in order, we must first cultivate our personal life. We must first set our hearts right. I thought that was appropriate for explaining why it's so important to have civil discourse and actually to engage in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Joellen, and thank you, all three of you for being on this this link to the statewide cohort. I just one question before pivoting to the members who may want to add to this. Are you part of other communities like with groups of three like Barre City, or is it a one-on-one relationship with staff at VLCT?
They use a variety of different combinations of communication. So sometimes we would be in a meeting, a breakout session with our own representatives. Sometimes we would be thrown in with other communities. It depended. Some of them were subject oriented and others were to help us with our own projects for our own cities. So it was kind of a combination of different things. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Councilor Deering.
Yeah, so really the people that are also engaged in this are people from planning commissions, select boards, city councils. So it's a variety of different municipal appointed people. So it's been nice to get a lot of different perspectives from places like Shelburne, and really just all different towns and cities through the state.
I have a very brief PowerPoint which talks about a strategy, which I believe.
We got it.
And just make sure this gets into the online. It's not in the packet, it's not in my phone, so just make sure it gets the.
Yeah, sorry, I was working.
Yeah,
on it.
no, I'm just saying make sure we get it up there.
So one of the things that we came up with, and I just have to say, it was a statewide problem. You know, we're talking with people in different groups from small towns all over Vermont, and they're all experiencing pretty much the same issue with civility. So it became a really deep and long conversations about this. So we came up with a kindness campaign because it's a really easy thing to understand, if not to do. So a kindness campaign is the primary way we can restore trust in municipal government. We want to make people feel comfortable. We want to make people feel welcome. And that includes people who don't typically show up. Next slide. So kindness, how we treat each other is the way we grow participation and engagement. And I think we've all had that experience of not feeling welcome at a place. Maybe it was city council, the first time you sat on city council, or the first time you came to city council. Or maybe it was going off to college if you didn't have college in your background. But everyone's had that experience of not feeling welcome. And so how we make people feel welcome is how we encourage participation. Kindness is a part of that. You know, I was thinking about like exclusion. I was thinking like, I was never chosen for the basketball team. Go Kiki. Anyway, next slide.
Nor was I, Sam.
But kindness doesn't mean that we don't dissent. Dissent is vital to our growth. It's important that it's important that we continue speaking to each other, especially when we disagree. It is not easy. Of course, we're going to be angry. Of course, it is going to be hard, but we have to learn how to dissent respectfully. Next slide. Next slide.
Yeah, it's,
It's next side.
there's a
frozen.
lag.
Maybe the next slide.
There it is.
Okay, so you can't really see this, but that's the dinosaur in back at Millstone. So we're suggesting 3 really simple actions. Listen more than you speak. You know, I think when we're all going out talking to residents for whatever reason, if we really want to understand them, we have to listen to how they see the world. And that's important, especially with each other. Ask questions that welcome more conversation. You know, we can all ask questions that completely close off any more conversation, like, why did you do that? But if you ask, like, how did you get there? Or what do you, how do you feel? Why do you feel that way? That's a different kind of question. And yeah, it's about listening. And move forward to solutions rather than backward to blame. It's so easy to get caught up in like, you did this and you did that and I did that, but it doesn't matter if we can go forward. So really simple. It's obviously much more complex, but we have incredibly complex issues before us. And this is just a little suggestion to get us to the next step. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks to the cohort and thanks for the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from council?
Is this training, I assume this training is ongoing, like we sent
Yes.
certain, so there'll be a 25 and a 26 and a 27 cohort? This is the,
No, not exactly. It's it ends. It's a 6-month. And
Right.
then more people from the city can become another cohort.
So, but it's sponsored by the Vermont League of Cities.
Vermont League of
and
Cities and
so-
Towns. What I'm saying, it's revolving training, so it occurs annually?
I know the answer to that. So they did the first group of cohorts, and that was their pilot. And they had so many requests from other communities that they decided to do a second round the second year. But each year they have to put in new financing into their budget. So they never know until the next budget process whether there'll be another cohort or not. We certainly hope so, because this not only helps every community individually, it provides a way to get some data about how people feel about their communities, which is going to be really useful.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions or comments, that takes us to our next item of new business, which is the authorization of ballot applications focused on landslide impacted properties.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm joined tonight, Ben DeJong, the state geologist, who you saw in the packet, several documents attributed to Ben. He's agreed to join. So thank you, Ben, for hopping on. And I thought it'd be helpful to have Ben here for some of the technical situations that may come up, especially since he's provided a lot of the documentation that you saw in the packet. So just, Councilor, there was a memo in the packet with some of the rationale and the supporting documents that have led us to reluctantly land at this decision. And I say reluctantly, from the city's perspective. I know there's some homeowners here tonight on the Zoom for whom this is not a reluctant decision, but I think as you've known, As you know, from the city's perspective, this has been very challenging because a decision on a buyout for each of these properties takes them permanently off the grand list. These become permanently green. And so that's why it's a difficult decision for the city. And that's why I was reluctant that we reached this point at the staff level. And really the background here is that, as you know, as a result of the floods, we didn't have just the devastation that we saw with the mud and the muck and the water, but there were a dozen or so properties that were impacted by landslides, and varying degrees of impact. You all know the houses on Pike Street, which are the first two applications for buyout that were approved. Those are threatened by an imminent or a to happen landslide that would just be very difficult. We had two of the homes that are on the list tonight were actually physically destroyed and unlivable, including Portland Street, which the city had to pay to demolish because it became a public health hazard over a city street, and Oswald Street, which is also now unlivable, and which was so powerful that threatened 19 Oswald Street, which the city also took emergency protective measures to save a house on the grand list. I think without a doubt, the most challenging decision has been related to 106 Courier Street. This home remains standing today. However, it's become very clear that it is on a very, very significantly compromised lot. It is such a challenging situation that the city, as you know, procured a study by a geotechnical specialist to get really firm understanding of the situation. After review from that specialist, after continuing conversations with that specialist, it was clear that rebuilding on this site would not be advisable unless the mitigation was done. And I think, as I've mentioned to the council before, we were waiting to hear whether, if it wasn't that house on that lot, a different house on that lot could happen without mitigation, and the answer was no. So, you know, that's how we've come, you know, and the other homes is 25 Oswald and 5 Portland is a similar story. The question was, even though those houses were destroyed, could different houses survive and be built on those lots without significant mitigation? And the answer was also no there. So we have, you know, I encourage or recommend the council to allow these buyout applications to proceed. There is some uncertainty in terms of the local cost. I've been speaking with Vermont Emergency Management. We've been great partners through all of this. They're paying for the local share of the first 2 buyouts we did. They cannot commit at this point to paying the local share of these buyouts because they're dependent on how the state budget pans out. So if there's money in the budget for matches, then these local matches will be covered by the state. I think there's some optimism about that, but they obviously can't commit to it until there's a final budget agreement. The memo contains the assessed values of these houses as they are today. I should have included in the memo for the council, but I did not, the lost tax revenue. The total lost tax revenue, if these 3 houses would be bought out, is over $12,000, $12,164. I hesitate to even give you an estimate on what a local share would cost because there's so many pieces that go into what a buyout would be. It's based on a fair market value the day before the flood. These houses are appraised below that today. It just wouldn't be accurate at this. I'd be throwing out a number at you. So again, very difficult situation. I know, you know, difficult from the city's perspective. I don't even mean to understand, or I cannot fathom how difficult it is from the property owner's perspective. I have, Ben, I don't, you know, maybe I'll put you a little bit on the spot. You were at these sites, you're an actual scientist. And so you might be able to maybe give some more context to the council because your reports were pretty unambiguous about the future of these lots as well. So I don't mind. Do you mind anything to share, Ben, from your perspective?
Not at all. Thank you, Nick. And thank you everyone for taking this issue up. I really appreciate it. I can see Andrea Young here at least. I don't know if other owners are on as well, but I know that this is a pretty significant moment for them. Yeah, speaking as the guy who showed up to these parcels in the thick of this, they're bad. They're each one of these. Obviously, the two that were compromised on July 11th, those are clearly bad. And frankly, the most important thing to be said is that nobody has been hurt in these things. I think that if Andrea were to stay in her house, I think that there could be a possibility that one person could still get hurt. So it is really wonderful for me anyway to see that this is going forward. What I usually do in a typical scenario, VEM, Vermont Emergency Management, tends to call on us when we have some of these tricky houses, and we come in, and as you know, probably now through this process, is we have to demonstrate imminence. And by FEMA standards and their definitions, that means, would a structure be compromised in the next 5 years? And suffice to say, that's just absolutely a no-brainer for these. So I have no hesitation in this decision myself.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So a couple hands up, Councilor Walzak and then Councilor Stockwell.
I was going to make the motion.
And I'll second it.
I was just going to ask a question. As I recall from the Sanborn Head report, mitigation would be incredibly expensive and involved, and you probably do not even recommend that? Or some sort of less invasive, less extensive way of keeping that area safe?
Correct. I think it would have to be a complete rebuild, because what we see there, what I think we see there, is a lot of fill materials that were put there in very much a non-engineered fashion. And so to shore that up, you would have to essentially start over, pull all of that out and redo it with proper drainage and cribbing, etc. You can make pretty much anything livable with the right amount of engineering and resources. If you really want to throw that amount of money at it, I'm sure it's possible. And any engineer in the room will tell you the same. It's just going to be prohibitively expensive.
Thank you.
Councilor Lozon.
Ben, thank you for that explanation. Nicholas, thank you. I know these are tough decisions, certainly going to support it for a few reasons, not the least of which these properties are uninhabitable. So when you look at, obviously, you know, we were doing the math earlier in the meeting about abatement and how that has affected our budget, how this is going to continue to affect our grand list. That's difficult enough. But with these particular properties, they could get full abatement forever. Correct, Carol?
Yeah.
So realistically, in terms of the property tax revenue, the city really isn't putting itself in a different place than we're in now. The only request that I would have on 106 Courier is, you know, and I'm kind of spitballing here, but $40,000 to tear that house down. You know, I've walked by the house, I've looked at the house. The house itself is very different than the other houses that we're approving the buyout on. And I wonder if we could have a conversation about moving the house. You know, I'm not an engineer and I don't move houses, but I watched Norm Messier pick up the Granite Museum, and I would have bet you anything it couldn't be done. So, you know, when you look at housing costs, so let's imagine, you know, it's $40,000 to level the house, to destroy the house. Imagine that for $100,000, somebody could pick it up and move it to one of the lots, a la Mayor Jake's infill development. Can we just give people a chance
Absolutely.
before we go tearing it down and losing all that value in that home? Can we just give people like Norm Messier or Jimmy Rogers, you know, give them a chance to look at it? Obviously, safety is going to be, you know, the primary concern, but they're pretty smart guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Just, I don't remember if you were back on the council when this happened or not, but when, Lucas was still here. So when
I was on vacation.
Caps, your sabbatical, when Head Start wanted to tear down, and they did eventually tear down that house on Seminary Street. Yeah, because Steve was involved in these conversations too. We had conversations about moving that house to a different empty lot, and it didn't work for a variety of reasons, but one of which was the cost to move it was a little over $200,000. Just for and that wasn't a deal we were willing to make pre-flood, but post-flood, why not? But just for your context, Nicholas, that's what it was.
Yeah, I'd just like to try that. I'd just like to throw it out there, and if
And
you know,
So Council Lozon, your interest is in having
not the city.
some engineering professionals at
Yeah,
at the city's cost, I
No.
assume. Who's paying these people?
no, not at the city's cost. I'm saying before you crush a home
Yeah.
and
Offer it
bring
up.
it to a landfill, could we simply say to rather than tear it down, could we say to the general public, you know, a la some of the infill development we're doing in our downtown now, who wants an opportunity for $1? The city would say $40,000 on tearing it down. Obviously, it would not be easy. It would not be inexpensive. But even if it's $150,000 to move a house, put a foundation under it, and buy a lot, you can't buy a house like that for $200,000.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to understand the details. So,
Yeah.
so in this case, it's not having structural engineers look at it. It would be putting it up, once the city had site control. I assume that there would be an opportunity for people to purchase it.
Mhm.
And assuming the city would be absolved of liability,
Absolutely.
they would then have to pay to move it, and there'd be a period of time for that. So there's a couple contingencies. One, we have to approve this buyout. And then if we approve the buyout, then if for that property, you're proposing that there be an opportunity for somebody to save the home if it's possible.
Correct.
Okay. Seems reasonable.
We have some hand,
I had a question.
Counselor Deering and then Counselor Shambell.
I had a question for you, Ben. So looking at the railroad bed that's set up on over in that area, what do you think the likelihood in the future for something like that to fail is going to happen when the next flood occurs?
Thank you. So the railroad bed, are you talking by the former railroad bed by Pike?
Yeah, above Pike and above Oswald.
Because that whole section of town really has the railroad bed, even through Railroad Street. Behind Railroad Street, there's some concern.
Sure. It's going to be very site specific because that slope changes as it goes along. For example, if you look at the parcel just adjacent to, I believe it's 36 Pike Street, it looks like somebody at some point kind of stepped that property down. It looks a way better maintained and like somebody took some measures to shore that slope up, which is very different than 36 or 44. I can tell you today that I am shocked that it hasn't failed yet at 44 or 36. I'm frankly stunned that it hasn't failed. I believe that one of the biggest contributing factors at that site is we had so much water so quickly in the drainage swale on the other side of the railroad bed that the hydrostatic force is pushing into that slope where essentially we're exceeding the resistance to fail, but it wasn't quite enough for full failure. If that drainage swale fills back up again, or if we get another, high intensity storm, I would be stunned if it didn't fail. And I would go on the record saying that any day of the week. One thing I will say is I did a sort of like a spring runaround looking at some of these higher profile sites a couple of weeks ago, and I noticed a lot of the trees that are sort of between the rail bed and some of the other parcels there have been removed. It appears to be probably a maintenance thing, probably by Green Mountain Power, protecting their assets along that.
Green Mountain Power.
That was somewhat shocking because those trees are perhaps the only thing holding that slope up at this time, and I would not have advised that they go in and take those trees out.
Is there any municipal notification process for when they have to do those line trimmings? I remember when I worked for the town of Milton that I would get those notifications from Belco, but it was a different utility in that area. So maybe Green Mountain Power doesn't do that.
I haven't gotten them.
Okay. So Councilor Shambell?
Just going back to Councilor Lozan's suggestion, I'm presuming that within that, if we were to decide at some point to go ahead with his idea, at least the homeowner would be taken care of beforehand. so that the homeowner is not hanging, waiting?
Yeah, I think, and not to speak for Kelly, I think your idea was to do this post buyout.
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay,
so,
okay.
yeah.
Councilor Stockwell?
But if, I'm also familiar with the Courier Street house, and it is gorgeous for one thing. So if that homeowner takes a buyout and then someone else gets their home, wouldn't it be better like them to give them an opportunity? I mean, I don't know how you can do that, but shouldn't they have the opportunity to keep their place and move it if there was a site to move it
You
to?
can't at that point. Once you effect the FEMA buyout, the land has to be vacant. So once you sign that paperwork and the homeowner gets the check, so to speak, the house has to be gone.
It sounds like Councilor Stockwell is suggesting like that there might be a right of first refusal to maintain the home. If, for instance, Ms. Young could find a vacant lot that she could move the home to.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, certainly the homeowner would be, it's a beautiful home, and I'm sorry for you, ma'am. Like I said, you know, to just take it to a landfill without at least some investigation doesn't seem quite right.
Ben, I had a question about the swale and then a little bit more about the Portland Street area. So the swale by the railroad, is that, when that's building up with water, is there a stormwater management solution that the city could program into its capital budget to try to move that water or retain it in a safe way?
I believe it's possible. At this moment, I'm aware of two culverts under that former railroad bed, both of which are significantly compromised.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they do convey water, but I'm sure that the lion's share of the water that would go through those culverts essentially leaks and dissipates just under the railroad bed itself.
Okay,
If
so
some effort were put into it, those culverts could be shored up and you could manage that water a lot more effectively, yes.
okay, so that might be something that staff and council, when they're looking at the capital program for culvert, that those could potentially save from future destruction and buyouts.
It's a wonderful question, Mayor, and I would highly recommend it. I have photographs of the interior of that culvert I could share at some point where you can see that it's completely rusted through.
Yeah, and Brian and I have spent a lot of, and with Ben too, and one of the challenges we've talked about, excuse me, doing any sort of significant work up there is also the challenge of getting the machinery up there to do it, because that could trigger the slide. Like, that's just a really horrible place to do any work safely, even for the workers who'd be doing it. So.
And then like very dry weather to do a culvert replacement after.
I mean, finding a spot to land any sort of heavy machinery up there would be tricky.
Yeah. The other question, Ben, I have was about the land above Portland Street. You may be aware that council is working in partnership with a nonprofit to do a major development in the Prospect Heights land, which is the land above that. It likely would involve new roads, new foundations, homes, some stormwater management, because I think it would come under the jurisdiction of likely come under the permit jurisdiction of a 3-acre permit or for A&R. But I'm just wondering what your observations are, if you'd have any recommendations as that project moves forward for us, given the topography or conditions of that land, what we should be thinking about to make sure that there isn't a whole bunch of new stormwater or landslides affecting future homes from that development.
I would love to take a look, but I have not seen the footprint of where that would be. If you could share any information, I'd be happy to throw that into a GIS and provide my own opinions on it. At this moment, though, I really couldn't do that.
Thank you. I see, Andrea, you had your hand raised, and then Amy Gelford.
I did. It was to Councilor Lizon's comment about moving the house. I can tell you that the floor on the second story is not flat, and there's cracks all throughout the ceiling and above doors and above windows. So I would say, not an engineer. I'm not sure the structure is any longer sound, but in addition to the bank. So I think it's a wonderful idea to consider. Is there an opportunity? And I'm not sure that the house could handle the move at this point.
Thank you, ma'am. Sorry.
Amy Golfer?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in anecdotally. I used to walk my dog up on that trail from Blackwell going south. And years ago, it was a pretty wild trail. And then people started mowing it and clearing it a bit more. And when they did, and when the grass was super short, sometimes the grass was cut so short, it would just be sort of muddy. I started noticing lots of broken glass, and I'd be trying to pick up broken glass, thinking, oh, I don't want my dog stepped on this broken glass. And it really made me not want to walk up there. But when I looked through the handout and I talked about sand and gravel fill, like, I honestly wonder if the fill up there is like really some awful stuff. Lots of bottle caps, broken glass, just, I don't know where that fill came from, but just anecdotally, like, yeah, it seems worrisome.
Thank you. Yeah, Ellen Kay.
What becomes of the properties that you buy out of the land? What's their status?
They
once you do
become
that?
city property that the city can not convey and must remain perpetually green with no infrastructure, very limited uses. You can put like a bench, no infrastructure, no pipes.
Just to clarify, that's for FEMA buyouts. If the city had $1 million to buy a property owner out, that we could do something.
So these buyouts we're talking about are FEMA buyouts?
FEMA buyouts, yeah.
Okay, so FEMA regulations say
you
has
can
to be
put
green and
park benches. You can put playgrounds on them. If they don't have infrastructure.
There are uses. They're just very, very,
very
limited.
They're limited.
And they can't impede flow of water. Generally, I'd wonder how this might apply because most of these are flood related buyouts, but the regulations say like you can't put because we're looking at this for potential relocation of the Wabi playground, right? So we can use land that's bought out in the north end for a playground. It just can't be a structure that impedes water movement.
Right. And it can't be for any kind of profit.
No, it would be owned by the city.
Thing on it. Okay.
It would be owned by. It would be owned by the city. I guess the city could charge admission to enter, but that would be a profit. But no, it has to be owned.
Not private.
Yeah, and it has.
Okay.
Correct. So, for example, if one of the neighbors of any of these property owners wanted to buy it to expand their parcel, we cannot do that. It has to remain in city ownership.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
There are 7 such parcels in the city right now. There are 2 up on Hilltop, and there's 5 of them on Brook that were incorporated as part of the flood mitigation project there. And the 2 up on Hilltop are just green space, so where the houses came down.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Guys have it, the motion carries.
Thank you, Ben.
You got it. Thank you.
That takes us to our second hearing warned for 7 p.m. on the charter changes. Whoa, yeah, how about that? Yeah, that's a little bit better than having to wait around, right? So we have charter proposals in the packet. The charter changes associated with the elimination of school district language that is no longer valid post-merger, right? Or
Post creation of the Barre Unified Union School District and the adoption of the Articles of Agreement.
We have charter changes associated with moving the town meeting day to May. We have charter changes to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in local elections. Except school-related elections, we have charter changes related to separating the clerk and treasurer positions and making the treasurer an appointed position. So this is an opportunity for public to speak to these items and for council to hear your feedback, although we've already voted on this and it's on the ballot, so there's no changing it. But it's a hearing, odd timing for a hearing. So
Well, I can point you to the statute as to why they're scheduled the way they are and why we had opportunities beforehand to talk about it. But I do want to just point out to people, there are sample ballots up on the city website. And each of those 4 topics that the mayor read off they are represented by one article on the ballot, even though many of them include multiple sections of charter that need to be changed to accomplish the particular item. So you'll see, there's an article that has all the sections that would eliminate the school district language. There's an article that has the change of the date. Just to point out so you understand what the 4 articles are that are on the ballot.
Sonia Spalding has her hand raised.
Sonia Spalding.
I have a couple questions, if I might. Regarding the number 2 charter changes associated with moving town meeting day to May, I apologize, can someone speak to why that change is being requested and what is the advantage to doing it? Because as a school board member, I'm very concerned and would like to know if the school budget and school board member positions are open and vacant and need to be voted on. Does that become on town meeting day? If this goes through and we decide to move it to May, is the school now responsible for paying for town meeting day votes? Could someone please help me understand that?
If the election in March was just Barre Unified Union School District and Central Vermont Career Center, then yes, they would be responsible for the costs associated with it, as they were this year. It's, I don't know, $4,000, $4,000 to $5,000. Oh yeah. And I don't know whether the manager wants to speak about the pros and associated with moving to May.
Yeah, I think from the city staff's perspective, the most important thing we do is the city budget, and having more time to do a city budget allows us to prepare a better city budget. This year, it happened to be that we were waiting for the legislature to act on aid that we were desperately needing to balance our budget and to present a budget that didn't gut services or result in double-digit tax increases. And I think it was well worth the wait to do so. We got the $1 million, and we have I think a really responsible budget on the ballot. But in any year, it's much better to budget with more data, budget with more time. Right now, we have to warn a budget the last week of January, and the staff starts working on the budget in September when we have August data, July and August data from the current year to use. And so we're really, in many respects, shooting in the dark about a lot of our projections because we have such little data. If the town meeting were in May, we would start a budget development process with at least a half years of data to go with, in addition to not having to warn a budget until April. We would have a good sense of many of the things that are happening at the legislature, whether or not we're asking for $1 million to balance our budget. This might be my bias because it's my background. I think municipal budgets are the most important thing we do. It's reflections of everyone's priorities, and I think that building a good one is important. I've heard the arguments about what does this do to turnout. I know I'm new here, but I would imagine that since Barre Town also votes on the second Tuesday in May, there might be some synergy and understanding that hey, Barre votes in May, and whether you're in town or city, you're voting in May. But really, the prime support from the staff side is help us build better budgets. I think we don't have the margins in this town, in this city, to to really wing it on the budget. We're making really difficult decisions even on good years. We think more time is only going to be better for the product we give to the voters.
So if I could respond, is that okay?
It's a hearing.
I appreciate what you're saying, Nicholas, and at the same time, the school does the same exact budget process, and we started our budget process in September, and it's like complete shot in the dark because you're not really sure. My concern with moving I realize it's already on the ballot, so I guess I'm just gonna get on my soapbox here. My major concern about moving the city-wide municipal budget and any offices, open council mayoral positions to May is you're leaving the school budget to have to pay for itself now, to pay for its election every single year, which is an added expense that we will have to incur. And then it also will leave, you may have lower turnout, but I think you're going to have lower turnout both in March and in May. And that's a huge concern for me, because we need as many people paying attention to school budgets as we possibly can. So I would hope that people will take all of those things into consideration. I understand if you can do it and you're recommending it, I understand why. It's frustrating for the school district to feel like we're being left out all on our own here. So thanks.
Would anyone else like to speak to the charter changes?
So does the fiscal year end June 30th for the city? So May 14th, we vote. If a budget goes down, can somebody walk me in through the scenario of what happens then?
2 weeks to turn around a new budget.
2 weeks to present a new budget,
I understand,
and
right.
It's actually 7 days.
7 days.
Yeah,
So-
at the shortest.
So that's where
8 days.
I think that's a clear argument against why, responsible budgeting, you need to have time as a legislative body to consider when your budget fails, to understand what the voters were thinking, what would package a responsible budget. So it really shortens and compresses the turnaround time when a budget fails, which budgets often do in very city.
and
So-
and in the school budget, the case of the school budget, it has 2 months before the next vote.
And could Nicholas or Carol just speak about what happens if you hit July 1 without a budget?
We've had one instance during my tenure when that has happened. We reached out to the state and say, hey, what happens? And they said, we don't know. That's
So what
pretty much
happened, Carol?
what they said.
We're both here.
They said you will get a budget. You can continue to operate. We recommend that you operate your essential services until you put your next budget up and get it voted. It's unlike the schools where you are essentially handed an 87% budget, 87, is it 87? Until you actually pass a budget. So, but you just keep voting it until you get one passed.
So you're operating at a bit of a diminished capacity.
Could be.
If go past July 1st.
I think we went
If it
to maybe
passes
the
or fails.
9th. I think we went to July 9th.
Yeah,
was-
and at the time, we did not, it wasn't pleasant. We didn't mow lawns. We still had public works. I mean, obviously the sewer plant ran. We had every police officer on the streets. We had every fireman and EMT personnel. They were all in the station. So those items were not affected, but positions that were considered non-essential, we did curtail some of that spending. It's interesting because, in listening to Mrs. Spalding's comments, the data is actually there if you want to look at it. When I first took office a jillion years ago, we actually did vote, the city voted in May and the school voted in March. At the time, that seemed silly to me just in terms of consolidation and cost savings. So we actually moved the vote. So there is some data there to see, well, what did happen to
It was
voter
just 1 year.
participation? And, you know, so we did move it backwards. But what I never heard at the time, and I haven't yet decided how I'm going to vote on this issue, because what I never heard at the time, and I really try to listen to what the city manager says, I never heard the city manager or the finance director say that additional time to prepare our budget would be really valuable. So I hear what they're saying, and I hear what everyone's saying. It's not, you know, I don't think it's cut and dried.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to make my decision on this. I'm not advocating in a certain way, but I do, you know, when I think back on last July and the upheaval of a natural disaster, which we understand with climate change, we should expect more frequently, that should we have this so-called perfect storm, no pun intended, of not having a budget at the end of the fiscal year and then a disaster. I understand we'll have essential people, but we need everybody. We need a functioning city government. So it sounds risky to me.
Under that scenario, I'd be very comfortable bringing everyone back under that scenario. I think everyone, as you said, everyone would be essential.
It's an additional handicap. So I just wanted to ask these questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Good
Lisa
questions.
Leota? Yes, I wanted to say I appreciate Nicholas's perspective on this, in that the extra months does allow the city to have a little more fine-tuned budget with a little more data behind it in the year that's come before it, and have something a little more firm. But my concern is that if the budget comes up in May and it fails, keep in mind that at that same election, we could have a suite of new councilors come into office. And they're trying to get their bearings on what's happening with the city and have to review and approve a budget really fast. And that feels really difficult to me, to expect that to happen if council's turned over substantially to pull that together. So it's kind of six of one, half a dozen of another. But as a voter, I would prefer to have the budget come in March, because if it does fail, we've got a chance to pull something together that's much more realistic in the time that's there and not have to rush something. That's all.
Councilor Booton and then Councilor Deering.
Yeah, the scenario of new counselors on happens no matter what. And we had that problem with the school board where we voted on the next meeting and it was brand new school board members. So it'd be identical in March as it is in May.
Councilor Deering.
I just wanted to add that for the most part, the manager is the one that does the budget for us. He presents it, gives us the adjustments and all of the information. And we're the kind of the ones that just stamp our approval and say, this is what we'd like to send out to the voters. So that's kind of really all I wanted to add.
Lisa Leota, did you raise your hand again?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, with all due respect, it still happens with new counselors, but if it happens in March, you've got 3.5 months to pull a new budget together, not 7 days or 2 weeks. So there's a little more time to get grounded in what's being presented and really understand what's happening. That's all.
And is I think the reason behind that is that the legislative body decides when they want to hold the election, and then there's a certain timeline that they work back from that. I mean, I feel very strongly against this. I think the voters should vote no on Article 3. For one, I don't think there was a great process behind these charter proposals. I hadn't heard the arguments from the manager about in that level of detail before tonight. And good process leads to good product. And I think deliberative democracy depends on having like a good issue statement. And I know we tried to set up a committee and council didn't want to do that. But in this case, it's a state town meeting day is a state holiday. People get off work to volunteer elections, to serve as candidates. They have the right to leave work. And so it's a great convenience to be able to vote on a state holiday, a protected state holiday, and having two different local elections can sometimes impact local businesses because people have the right to participate in local elections. So it can mess with schedules at local businesses. There's a consistency that I think is important when we hold our local elections in the vast majority of the state, all using the same process and timelines, because there's a news cycle, people hear about the issues, people read the articles, they understand that that this is what's coming up, and it's convenient when you can vote in one local elections instead of two local elections or three local elections. And we heard that it adds costs to our government entities because elections are not inexpensive. We have a shorter budget turnaround time. And I recognize that there's a convenience and an opportunity to have more data, but the convenience of a few staff members is nothing compared to the convenience of 4,000 people and their voting rights. And off-cycle elections result in lower voter turnout. And I think this could have the outcome of suppressing democratic participation in the city of Barre. So I hope Barre City residents vote no on 3. Amy Gelford.
Hi, I just had a couple questions. So am I thinking right that when there are for state or national office, if there's primaries, those will be what, even years in March? It's been a long day. Am I doing the math right on that? That there would be
Only presidential primary once every 4 years. State primaries are in August.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay, I was trying to get at Sonia Spalding's question of when it's the school only versus other things. Okay, so there's the whole August thing, which yeah, that's already confusing. I think to the question of previous data, I'd be curious which way the budget would tend to go if you have to prepare it for March versus May voting. Like, would you tend to make it bigger just in case in March? Would you tend to make it smaller? Like, is there any pattern to how that would be? And I guess what you'd have to look at is what was passed versus, I guess, actual expenditures, because you probably can't spend more. I guess it's capped probably by the budget in terms of what you can spend. But, you know, if you went back and looked at years of what you thought the budget needed to be and any adjustments that had to be made or what percent spent, is there that kind of data to look at? Like how good are we at setting budgets?
Yeah, Amy,
like,
there's
side?
absolutely. I mean, if the sooner we do a budget and you can see it in the product from this year, the earlier we have to prepare it, the more conservative we have to be in the negative directions for the taxpayer, I would say. Let me just characterize it that way, right? So we assume less revenue and higher expenses because there's just way more unknowns. We haven't been through snow season, right? So that just in itself, like we just don't know that. We may have, there may be changes in fuel prices. There may be all sorts of things that happen. We may have, this year we had, unfortunately, in the negative, we weren't able to fill police vacancies. And so we had to bump up the police overtime budget again, because we know that we're just not going to be able to, we're going to have that cost, right? So it cuts both ways, but I think that's generally speaking, the sooner we're crafting it, the more conservative in the negative direction for the taxpayer we are being. And that's just to be responsible. The sooner, the more data we get throughout the year, the better projections we can make to create a better product to present to the voters.
Okay, so that's one seasonal thing. And then the other one I wondered about is sometimes what's on the ballot is also bond votes, like for infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So that can get complicated because if you're competing for funding with other municipalities, granted they could have special elections for bond votes too, so they could be any time in the year, but sometimes municipalities being on different calendars has consequences. But also just in terms of seasons, like I don't know, like how much of a lag time does there tend to be between an infrastructure bond vote or things like the sidewalk and paving and that sort of thing, and when the work actually goes into contract?
I haven't done a bond vote here. The street sidewalks improvement, that's pretty simultaneous from when we get the approval to when we start. I mean, there's time, That work usually doesn't start till deeper into the construction season anyway. So that's not going to be impacted, for example, by the May vote. And the capital fund is usually has some prior year funding to float some work anyhow. So I don't know the answer on the bond vote. I imagine that we could put a bond vote, and maybe it looks like Clerk Dawes wants to respond to that part. I'll let her.
With regards to bonds, once you have voter approval, there's virtually no delay in beginning the project, because even though you're going to go to the bond bank and the bond bank has windows for when you can apply, we would go to our local financial institutions and do a bond anticipation note, which we can do with a couple weeks. So it's virtually no delay with regards to rolling out bond projects.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking more about going to bid, like whether you would go out to bid for projects without having the positive bond vote in place. So.
Amy, also to your question, that the council can also warn bond votes on November elections as well, right?
Yes, that's a whole different topic, though.
Yeah,
So,
okay, all right. Councilor Booten?
I think the answer is it's complicated.
I think we did have a committee.
we did.
But that being said, I do want to touch base on the comment about Nicholas. He did multiple times tell us about this and how beneficial it is. It's the only reason why I suggested to put it on the ballot, is because of what he said. And he said it multiple times in this chamber. That being said, since we're talking about things we would and would not like to see, I certainly hope that people make the decision not to allow children to vote. With that, I'm done.
Are there any other comments? All right, with that, we'll close the hearing at 7:17, and that takes us to our upcoming business. So this is the last meeting before our local election on May 14th. It would.
No, we've got a meeting on the
We got another
Oh,
one.
we do?
Yep.
No, I meant like this upcoming meeting is the last
Oh,
meeting.
yes.
I'm sorry, yeah, before the election, so, yeah. Are there upcoming items?
Just from my perspective, I know the police department's prepared to do a report that Councilor Stockwell had reached out about, so we'll have Chief Vale to do that.
Great, thank you.
And
Councilor Lozon?
thank you. We had talked, matter of fact, it was in the minutes, that discussion about ARPA, declaring the funds spent, would be actually on this agenda. But I understand people are busy and it's not. I'd like to just have that discussion and get that one behind us.
You were gonna write a memo, right, to put in the packet?
No, the manager, I deferred to the manager and the finance director. I mean, I certainly can. I'm very familiar with the Treasury's final rule. So I mean, I'm certainly happy to do that if you want to work on it, Nicholas.
That was my omission. I met with Don about that this week, and guidance we've gotten from VLCT says that the timelines continue even if we count it as spent revenue. So I will make sure I get that written down and get it to the council. I was supposed to mention that during the manager's report.
Listen.
Yeah.
It's not like you've been doing nothing. It's okay. Like I said, I'd just like to get it behind us.
Of course.
All right. If there are no other items, then that takes us to roundtable. Councilor Geary?
You've got one on mine.
Oh, Andrea Young.
Thank you. I just wasn't in a place before to ask a couple follow-up questions on the previous vote about the buyouts. Big picture, what are the next steps? Who can answer specific questions about the process, and who takes the lead on making sure that the process happens? Is it my responsibility? Is it someone else's responsibility? Just want to get a better understanding of the process. And thank you for voting yes. Like huge weight lifted.
Yep. Hi, Andrea. So you and the other property owners will receive an email from myself with Janet with the forms that are required for the application process. And then once you complete those forms, I sign them, and then they're turned over to Vermont Emergency Management. We have a contract with Vermont Emergency Management to process the applications. So you'll see the forms. You have to get some notarized signatures. I know Clerk Dawes has been doing some of those notarized signatures. So has Tess actually, and anyway, you'll get an application, and once you get it to us, we sign it and we send it off to Vermont Emergency Management for processing with FEMA.
And for questions about things like if it's current market value or day before disaster market value, is that something I would come to you with? Would I go directly to Stephanie Smith? I'm trying to make sure I understand the communication channels for the next several months.
I mean, you can ask me, and then any questions I don't know how to answer, I usually ask Stephanie or her team. But yeah, usually, so for the purchase price, I know that's a common one. And what we tell people is that, there's an appraisal done of the property, and its typical process is fair market value the day of the event, the day before the event. At the city level, we don't have any say in what that is. We're kind of out of that part of the process. So anything beyond that, I'd have to ask folks at VEM about, but that's the typical. And I know that if a property owner is unhappy with the offer, they can get their own appraisal done to sort of commence a back and forth. But that's about as deep into it as we go on the city side.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? All right, so that takes us to roundtable. I'll start with Outside Wings, Council Lozon.
I'm fine.
Council Deering?
Happy to be on April vacation from school. You just stay safe out on the roads there. Make sure that you're driving safe in the community. We've got extra kids out doing things, and just be careful.
Councilor Stockwell.
I've been hearing from residents about places that they want cleaned up for Green Up Day. So we have a number of people, the places marked out. We're going to get a crew together. We'll get Ward 3 cleaned up, at least in part. And I pass.
Councilor Shambell.
I pass.
Councilor Wozniak.
Pass.
Councilor Booton.
Yeah, I got two things. One, I just want to read a section of an email that we all received from Kristen Touziant, who's stepping down after serving on our police advisory committee since the beginning. And I'm very disappointed that she's leaving, and I tried multiple times to convince her otherwise. But she wrote this paragraph, and I just feel that it's important to have it in record. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this amazing, hardworking group of individuals. These 4 members deserve all the credit. Together, we've gone through many policies, page by page, word for word. We ask questions, the often difficult and confusing ones. Some of these policies have content in them that is sometimes disturbing to read. This group has approved nearly 100 policies, and I'd like to know how many we've actually been through. We also have to give so much credit to Chief Vale for providing all these policies. They are well written, clear, and it's much appreciated, and we appreciate you. So big kudos to Kristen for her time in the Police Advisory Committee and Chief Vale. I know that some of those, probably most of those, are CALEA related policies. And I'm very excited, as someone that tried to push CALEA almost 10 years ago, that we're moving down that route. And for those that don't know what CALEA is, it's the gold standard of policing. And there's certification involved in it. I don't know if we're making any attempts on going down that route, but it certainly helps, I believe, with insurance. And I just, big kudos for that. And also, since we're not going to be meeting before the 4th, Blow Up to Glow Up this year, May 4th at 11 a.m. So come down and take a look at all the fun people in the blow up costumes. With that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Counselor. And also on May 4th, I understand the Barre Senior Center will be holding a fundraiser at the Elks, which we got an email about. So look for that information on their website. The Housing Task Force met last night, had a great meeting. Received a presentation from Amanda Guston about flood recovery data. They compiled a lot of the data management from Barre Up that was really well done. I think Councilor Booton has well said about all of Chief Vale's policy work. Clearly has a brilliant policy mind and a deep commitment to the rule of law. I'd also want to welcome, we have a new Salvation Army Corps officer here in the city, Zachary Lyle Belong. I might not be saying Belong? DeLong, okay. And his wife Caitlin. So welcome to Barre City. And with that, also looking forward to Green Up Day. I love that. Is there a Green Up Day coordinator? I forgot to ask. Like that, usually the school has somebody parks out back. If
They're not, actually, Nicholas probably can speak more to it than I can, so.
Yeah, there's going to be the person who used to coordinate for the school left the school. So there's a couple of related events going on. There's going to Lydia Welch, I think is her last name. Lydia, who runs Earthly Wonders, is going to be hosting an event coordinated with Spalding and City Hall Park. There'll be sort of a hub there, and then we got the bags delivered from Kate, who does that annually, and then I know that Barre Up is working on sort of a tangential event for people with who still may have some flood destroyed debris and as well. So Lydia, I would say, is sort of taken over the coordination side with the event at City Hall Park.
So, and that's the first Saturday in May, always the first Saturday in May, and you can also donate to Green Up Day when you, if you're late filing your tax return, which nobody probably is, but you can always probably make a donation to that. Also, great to see that the ARC, the Alternatives Recycling Center, has reopened behind Dollar General on North Main Street. Another great venue to recycle things like batteries and plastics and compost, where I dropped off some this Saturday. And with that, I'll pass. And that takes us to our executive session on real estate.
Move for findings.
Second.
There's a motion for findings and a second. Any discussion on the findings? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it, the motion carries. Is there a motion to enter executive session at 7:36 with the city manager and just the city manager? All right.
Yep.
All right.
Sure.
All right.
And a second somewhere?
Second.
There's a
Thank you.
second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it, the motion carries. So.
Oh, it's going to be a quickie. I'll have the memo.
That's why she should have come. That's why she should stay.
Why? It's gonna be what?
Seriously, Carol, I think.
It's gonna be fun.
I think 5 minutes. Exit executive session.
No.
There you go.
Move to adjourn.
No, we need to move to executive. Hey, Tadiran gets the motion. Who's the second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
All those
Move to
opposed?
adjourn.
Second.
There's a motion to adjourn in a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries.
Good night.
Go team.